So since it's 6 o'clock, first I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. This presentation is hosted by the MBA Network at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. It's an organization run by students focused primarily on supporting current MBA candidates and alumni through online networking and virtual events. And this evening, we'll be hearing from Rocio Garza, who spent 10 years in the broadcasting industry. She's also an actress who's currently represented by Collier Talent Agency. Rocio graduated from Concordia University, Texas, with a degree in multidisciplinary studies. After getting a taste for Lean Six Sigma as a graduate student, she has recently challenged herself to learn about coding and business intelligence tools. She was a founding member with Turnkey Vacation Rentals, where she took on roles such as recruiter, hiring manager, and demand generation operations coordinator. Rocio currently transitioned into the marketing program specialist role with BMC Software, an American enterprise software company in Houston, Texas. She's a current TAMU-CC MBA student and member of the MBA Network. And with that, I will turn it over to her to discuss how she pivoted career paths during the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's really great to be with you guys. Thank you for taking some time out to join us. And grateful to the MBA Network for allowing me to just share my story. And I hope that this is able to help you navigate through these very just bizarre times that we are living in, that we call 2020. So I'm going to talk about the resume process. I'm going to talk very little about that. I think there's a lot of resources out there, but I want to share just from my perspective how this helped me, work experience, the application process, the interview process, and then we really want to leave some time for Q&A, and that's for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have, and obviously the things that we discuss here will stay here. So I believe some of that portion will not be recorded, and it's really to just keep those things amongst ourselves. I think this is a great platform to share all those things, right? All those things that we're all going through from the pandemic, the economic impact it has had, to now working fully remote, some of you, and having to homeschool children as well. So let's go ahead and dive in to the resume part of it. And so what I did is I met with the career services. I attended webinars with Indeed, Google, Amazon, and Apple, primarily because those are companies that I'm interested in and possibly going to in the future. And I also worked with Glassdoor and Indeed because I served as a recruiter for 7 years. I was also the hiring manager and the recruiter. So these are things that really helped me and really have sort of stood out. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is creating a template that matches the job that you are looking for. And this is important because, for example, I decided to go from demand gen to marketing analytics. And so marketing is a little bit more, open and receptive to being creative. So I have my standard resume, and then I have my marketing resume that even had a picture of me. I don't use it anymore, but I use it from time to time when I was looking for a job. So you want to be able to get creative if it allows the opportunity to do so. Also, your resume, and this is just probably just standard, your resume should be one page. It's nowadays, as a recruiter, we used to, for any position at Turnkey, which is a successful vacation rental startup in Austin, I used to look at about I want to say 200 resumes per position, depending on the position, right? But with COVID, that increased to about 500 to 600. So, at the time we were looking at over 600 resumes for one position. So, and we'll talk about that, how you can stand out and all that good stuff. So another thing to include in your resume is use those keywords for the applicant tracking systems. This is what we use for those keywords. And so those keywords are going to be really important for formatting. Sometimes you have to upload your resume, right, to these archaic systems, and sometimes it's an easy upload and it formats everything for you. And when you upload your resume to LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed, it will sort of scrape keywords. So one of the things at LinkedIn that I really like is when you click on searches, when you're looking at the app, you click on searches and it will tell you 25% data analyst roles, 25% marketing, 25% demand generation. So that's what your resume is attracting. So you want to make sure that your resume lines up with the job that you're looking for, right? So if you're looking for marketing analytics and it's giving, for whatever reason, maybe teacher, but that's not what really what you want to do. So you want to make sure that you will that everything is in sync. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so the resume itself should be quantifiable. The objectives should be quantifiable. These are a couple of sentences. These are metrics. This is where we get the first impression of you, right? And this can be a tedious endeavor. And so if you're applying to Google, Apple, or Amazon, a lot of times these recruiters talk to each other. And so it's important that you get very creative with your objective. That includes your LinkedIn profile and Glassdoor and Indeed. And I'll show you examples of mine later in this webinar. Also, your stories should be short overviews that relate to your current position. There is no need to write a thesis. There's no need to write a dissertation. It should just be short, sharp, and straight to the point. Recruiters are just as exhausted, as frustrated as you are because they now have to look through so many more, resumes. And I assure you that our goal is really to find a candidate. Our goal is not to make your life more stressful or ours. We really do want to find that candidate that fits with the company and the culture, et cetera. So another thing you can do is customize your LinkedIn wall to match your field. So I believe I saw this on Discord. There's a link for LinkedIn, right? Hashtag LinkedIn. So I was looking at a lot of those LinkedIn profile URLs, and a lot of them are very generic. I think it's just a standard one. But you could also make sure that you can customize it so that you make your LinkedIn profile stand out. So I went ahead and changed mine to Rocio Garza MBA because I plan to graduate 11/24. I'm the last class of 2020. So you want to keep your resume and LinkedIn consistent. Make sure, like I said, you customize your LinkedIn profile so recruiters can find you. So the whole idea is for them to find you, right? Don't make it much more difficult than it needs to be. So get creative. That's a great place to start. You can also get creative with your wall. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, I created a graphic. I think there's a specific pixel that you can use. So you can't use like a large image and try to make it smaller because it's not going to work. It has to be, I think there's specific dimensions for LinkedIn. I don't remember what the pixels are, but you could, if you know somebody who works in graphics or you know how to do this, you could add that as an added touch. So if you're looking for a job as a nurse data analytics, data science, operations coordinator. You could add a wall pick that sort of emulates what you're looking for. So one of the things that I did a complete Botox on everything. I mean, my LinkedIn, my resume, my Facebook, my Instagram, my my Indeed account. I did a complete Botox. And so it's important that everything, it sort of lines up. I was telling Sophia that my neighbor is a recruiter at Google. And unfortunately for me, right, she's a recruiter for engineers. And so she always talks about like what she's looking for, what she's not looking for. And I have a lot of those tidbits and I listen, but since I'm not really in that profession, one of the things she looks at is the LinkedIn. She's like, I want to make sure that your LinkedIn matches your resume. And so also, as I mentioned before, just make sure that it is consistent. So you remember that you wanna stand out. You don't want to look like everybody else. So also work experience. Let's move on to work experience. This is where I feel a lot of people get stuck because for work experience, I think the biggest misconception is that people copy paste their job description. And so that doesn't tell us, that tells me your job, but that doesn't tell me what you did for the company. So that's a huge difference, right? So for your work experience, you want to always include what you did. How did you add value to that role, right? Include keywords. For example, instead of indicating that, and I see this so many times, instead of saying that you managed a remote team or I managed a team of 15 people, you can say, I created an automation system with a remote team that increased productivity by 65%. So remember, you want to make this quantifiable. Did you reduce failures? Did you find efficiencies? Did you break sales records? That's what we're interested in seeing. That's what we're interested in learning. We sort of, recruiters have an idea when you copy paste your job description. That's what we call lazy work. So this is, your resume does require some work. You have to put in some effort in your name, your brand, which reminds me of, if you've all ever read The Startup of You from LinkedIn, founder of LinkedIn. It starts with you. You are your brand. Even if you work for a company, you are a brand. So you have to make sure that you market yourself from the summary, just from the very beginning, from your resume to your LinkedIn, and that it's consistent. So think in terms of metrics. We don't want to know that you worked with a team and that you worked really well with them. We want to know, how did you save the money? How did you save the company money? How did you make the company money? How did you find any efficiencies? And did you change any processes? Did you implement processes? Did you complement any processes? Skills. It's a good idea to include soft skills such as communication. This is basic, and I'm sure you guys know this. But hard skills could be tools that you know how to use. And also it's a good idea to use beginner, intermediate, and fluent. Use those terms if applicable. Also, your education, obviously do add the most relevant education first, include the Dean's List, awards, and certifications. And I'll talk about certifications after this. List projects or coursework relevant to the position. So one of the things that I did in my resume, because at the time I was working on a Tableau, aside from working on my MBA, I am working on a Master's of Science Data Analytics certification through Simply Learn, that is co-developed by IBM. So I think this is what I see very often, is that we can get as many certifications as we want. A lot of them, there's so many of them out there that are free, right? And we get the certificate and we post it on LinkedIn. But recruiters don't want to see that you got another certification. We want to see what you learned, like post your project, your Tableau project, or Python project. Right now, I just submitted my Python project, and I had to build a model to predict the app rating for Google Play Store. So I just submitted it to for approval. So those are the things that recruiters want to see, your project and how it may tie into a company. Whatever your project may be, it doesn't necessarily have to be data science, but that's the area that I'm marinating in now. So certifications are, they don't, they're not, they don't help you, they don't hurt you, they don't really hinder you. I think that they just sort of offer a comparative advantage, and they could see that you're a lifelong learner, or that you're constantly trying to better yourself, and that's always a good sign. If they are job critical, then include them at the top of your resume, which is what I did. I actually included it at the top because I wanted to transition into marketing analytics. So also, in my case, include some project on LinkedIn and your resume. As I said, oh my God, those certifications, I see them all the time. And I was guilty of doing that until I changed my strategy for that. Also, so the basis of why we're here today, right, is transitioning into a different role. So one of the things that has helped me is during COVID, pre-COVID, I worked for a vacation rental platform industry, and regretfully, travel was the first thing that was hit because of COVID. Travel stopped, it was frozen. So as a result, the travel industry and vacation rentals took a big hit. So as a result, I had to take a 20% pay cut from March to July. And because of that, I knew that I didn't want to rely on a job that relied so heavily on travel, because, we've had a lot of things happen, not just with COVID, but at least for turnkey, if there's a hurricane or any acts of God like that, it really affects our business. I didn't want to be in that position anymore. So, as I mentioned, lean heavily on telling your story in the objective and summary fields. So do explain the paradigm shift. So one of the that I did on LinkedIn was I was honest with myself, and I was honest in the things that I wrote. I wrote that I had worked in startup for 6 to 7 years, and that I started taking these BI classes, and I became really excited about BI, and this is what I was doing. So I was very honest with myself about myself. And that's really the truth. I explained it in a way that I've been doing this for this long, but now I just doing this self-learning courses, and I really like it. I'm really into it. And the moment I wrote that and I started posting that verbiage, it sort of got attention by people in the data science and analytics community. So one of the things I did was I joined forums, blogs, or groups that demonstrate your interest. At my former job, there was a machine learning free class every Friday from 3 to 5. And I started learning little by little. I started picking up the verbiage and speaking their language. And from learning that, I started changing how I wrote out my LinkedIn, my Facebook, and my Instagram, not so much, because I use my Instagram for acting. So one of the things I did was I started building my new network. How did I do that? I went into LinkedIn. I think it took about an hour. I looked at all the companies that I was really interested in. And I looked for LinkedIn and looked for recruiter, Amazon, and I added every recruiter on Amazon, every recruiter on Google, every recruiter on Tableau, Oracle. I mean, I just went on and on. It took me about an hour. I wrote down I sat with myself and I wrote down all the companies that I was really interested in. And as a result, I have a lot of recruiters from top companies on my LinkedIn because I started building my network. And after I built that network, they like to post a lot of information. And I just started commenting on them. And once I started doing that, there's a connection and interaction. Like Amazon now has like a virtual candidate lounge, which is really cool. You log on and they have a list of all the candidate webinars that you can attend. And I started commenting on those. Oh, I'm going to attend this one. And just things like that, just so that they can familiarize themselves with who I am. So this is a good time if you're trying to pivot into another job, is make those connections now. Also the application process. I think this is probably the most frustrating part. I want to say that my story was very unique. The moment I did Botox on my LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed, resume, within, I want to say 3 weeks, I did a job with BMC software. And so I interviewed on a Thursday and I was hired by Friday before 5 o'clock. So, and a lot of it had to do with how I just positioned myself, how I branded myself, how I viewed myself, and how I conveyed in the interview. The application process, do your due diligence. What I did was I kept a spreadsheet on role, date applied, core values, products, services offered, key players, and team. During my interview, I talked about their core values. I mentioned one. I mentioned their product, Control M, which is now, the irony is I get to promote Control M, which started as a mainframe, and that is their key money. That product makes a lot of money, and I'm so I talked about that. I also researched the people that I was going to interview with on LinkedIn so that I could familiarize myself with them and have something to talk about as well. So I think it's important that you sort of have like a tracking system for yourself so that you you use that when you're talking to the recruiters or the hiring managers. As I mentioned, I added the recruiters to LinkedIn. It did take me an hour, but I focused on tech companies here in Austin and Silicon Valley area. I did customize every cover letter because as a former recruiter, I noticed that people who applied for Turnkey had the same cover letter. So we just call that lazy work. Oh, it's lazy work. Another thing is that I noticed is, we'll talk about that in the next slide about quality versus quantity, but you want to treat your job as a job search like a job. And I really did. I couldn't obviously commit to 8 hours a day, but I did commit an hour a day to my job search. It's not gonna like, there's not gonna be like some stork that falls from the sky or somebody that knocks on your door and says, hey, we've been looking for you. You also have to do the work as well. Also, as I mentioned, update your Glassdoor and Indeed once a month, and I'll show you mine. And so on Indeed, I believe it's Indeed, when you list your resume, it will give you like it will ask you if you want somebody to review it. Go ahead and check it off because they will come back with metrics on what recruiters are looking for. So when you upload that, do make sure, I think it's one of the fields, and just go ahead and check it off. And that's how I learned like, oh, this is really how they perceive me. So let me tweak my resume so that they can see me the way that I want to be perceived. The interview process, at least at TAMU, we try to make this seamless, and I'm sure some companies are very different. But it's always good to use the STAR method. For those of you that don't know, that includes talk about a situation, the task, and the action that you took, and what was the result. It's always a good idea to stick to one great story. So a lot of times when I hear people in interviews, they're just going like from one thing to another. Stick to one great story, right? So, for example, when I think every company asks you, tell me about yourself. Well, this is just really an icebreaker. This is your opportunity to connect to maximizing your leadership and your competency. This is not this is not the opportunity to go really deep and talk about your boyfriend moving out and you're out on the street and you need a job. I think that we need to stick to the interview parameters, which is it's just a way for us to find a way to connect with you, right? One of the things that I like to ask is what are your hobbies? One of the things that a lot of employers ask is tell me something about you that isn't on your resume. So it doesn't have to be super difficult or serious. I think we hired somebody one time that, oh, I have my own tech podcast. Oh, great. Tell me about that. Yes, I do my podcast at home and I have 100 listeners. Oh, great. Is that going to affect your work at Turnkey? Oh, no. I do that on the weekends. Okay, great. And I had another candidate who sold CDs at a vending machine, and that he collects old records, vintage records. So you learn about somebody. It doesn't have to be like super serious. So just be thinking about when they say when they ask you, tell me something about you that isn't on your resume. I think I said, oh yeah, I'm learning how to code on weekends. I tried baking. I really sucked at it, so I just decided to learn how to code. And I'm much more successful at coding, I think. And so they laughed, and then we moved on. And so it doesn't have to be, like I said, super serious. Keep it short, sharp, and straight to the point. Number 3, what is your comparative advantage? Have you really thought about that? What do you have to offer that somebody doesn't have to, that somebody doesn't offer? And really, number 4 is what do you get when they get you? Really think about that. Let me go ahead and let me just finish this slide, and I will get to that question. Sound good? That work? So what do people get when they get you? People want to know, are you, what do you have going on? How is this work going to fit in? How are you going to fit in? I think number 5, one of the key things to a job is, aside from your resume and all the things that you've done, is, are you a great fit for our company? There's already a company in place. There's already a culture in place. There's already a cohesive team, or maybe not a cohesive team, right? But for the most part, they want to make sure that you're fitting into their group dynamics, and that's very important. A lot of times, when we were interviewing, we want to make sure that that you're going to fit into this culture. We had a lot of applicants from Apple, Google, Amazon, and those are Fortune 500 companies. How are you going to fit in with startup world? Because startup world is very different than working for a company like Google. So we have to make sure, like, you may have you may check out all the boxes, but we got to make sure that you're a great fit and that you also have those, believe in those core values. And speaking of core values, I'm going to give you guys an example. For Amazon data scientist interview process, which I'm not applying for, but one of the things that they do is a 3-step process. It's a phone call, a short phone call. Then they submit, for example, they send you a machine learning problem. There's 3 problems and you get to pick one. And then, so if you pass that, you meet with their team, then you go on to interview by 5 people for about 4 hours. And so in that interview, they cover their 14 leadership principles of Amazon. If you know anything about Amazon, this is very well documented. They are huge advocates about their leadership principles. So whatever company that you want to interview or are going to interview with, make sure that you know all these things. Make sure you have maybe a story lined up for any of those core values. And that's so that you can already tie yourself to the company. Oh, I see that due diligence is one of your core values. Well, in my last position, this is how I implemented due diligence. I was in charge of whatever, and so find a way to connect it so that they can sort of visualize it and see, oh, I see that he could probably fit into that. So one of the things about the data scientist position, if you all are interested, I don't know, is that they sent out an email to say that they are going to review resumes for about 3 to 4 weeks. So expect to hear from Amazon in about a month. So a lot of it has to do with supply and demand, and a lot of it has to do with COVID. There's just so many resumes to get through. And just recently, Apple sent me a survey about how do you think we're handling their recruiting process. So the thing about Apple is that they have that dashboard, and Apple is very different than Amazon and Google. But my point is that you want to make sure you tie in those values if you're interested in a job for Amazon. So on a rare occasion, you will hear back within 4 hours. My situation was very unique. I really worked hard at just changing everything around because as I was telling Sophia, I came from a background of TV, acting. I have IMDb credits. And so if you Google me, you're going to see that. And so for a long time, I had to really convince people, no, I really do work as well. And I could be a really great lead gen operations coordinator. I could really be a great marketing analyst. So I could do, I could do more than one thing. So I really have to fight harder and work harder to change the mindsets. All of those things are on YouTube or just on Google, my commercials or whatever. So I think I feel like I've had to fight harder, but you probably did in your own way, right? So I hope that this has helped you. Maybe there's one takeaway from all of this. And I think we have about less than 30 minutes. And I really wanted to consider your questions so that I could get some peace of mind through this unique process of 2020.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rocio. I'm gonna stop the recording now.